With SharePoint Designer, I can go in and edit a workflow anytime I need to. It's really easy. Just open up Designer, click on Workflows. Let's say, for example, I want to change this workflow. I can go ahead and make sure I'm in the right place. Here's my overall settings. Click Edit Workflow. Make some changes, save and publish again. Easy enough to do. Every single time I do this, SharePoint creates a new version of this workflow, because it's possible that during the time I have this workflow open working on it, somebody actually goes in and says, here's another new hire. And the workflow that they use will be the old one, the one that was open already for me to work with. Until I save and publish this again, all the time I'm sitting, having this open, adding some actions, changing some steps, it's possible that somebody could be creating a new workflow. So as soon as I open it up, there's a new version that gets created. What do I do with all of these? Well, I can ignore them, but I probably shouldn't. Let's go over and take a look and see how we're going to get to those workflows and manage them. So I'm going to go back over to the list in SharePoint. There are a variety of ways that I could do this. I can go to SharePoint, or if I'm in Designer, I can actually go to my lists and libraries and I could open up my employee onboarding and I could go to the list. But I prefer keeping SharePoint Designer and SharePoint both open. Once I'm in the library, on the ribbon I can click List, Workflow Settings, and I'll see that I actually have 4 different versions of employee onboarding. Now, one of them won't have any other information associated with it. It doesn't say current version, but it doesn't say previous version either. So this is the one that's current. If I just saved and published, this is it. These are all prior instances. You'll notice that the very first version, there are actually no workflows associated with it. I created it and saved it, but that wouldn't have gotten it here. I published it and it was added, but nobody hired a new person during the time that that was the current version. However, as soon as we fired up the next version, we had somebody who was added, and these workflows are actually in progress. They're not done. If they were completed, it would show 0 here. So we have a workflow that was underway and a set of rules that were created for that workflow. You might remember that early in this workflow, we didn't notify the local manager when we had hired somebody. So these older ones still won't do that. Even though there's a new workflow, there's nothing that takes and routes this old document through the new workflow. Imagine that you're standing on the top of a hill, and every time there's a new workflow, you've got a kid on a sled or a wagon and you shove him down the hill. The fact that you're going to shove the next kid in a different direction does nothing to change the wagon or sled that's already flying down the hill. It's got a course, it's going to get there, it'll run into a tree or it'll have a happy ending. It doesn't matter, it's gone. But even though you can't change the old ones, you can say, we're not going to use these anymore. I'm not going to use that path that ends up with a small child wrapped around a tree any longer. So we can go back and we can get rid of these workflows. Just choose Remove a Workflow, and you're going to see this new window that's going to show all of those different items and how many instances of workflow we have. So this one, for example, these are old. And as soon as a workflow is old, there's only one current workflow. Every other workflow is marked No New Instances. In other words, when I add a new employee to the onboarding list, these instances, these old workflows won't be used. This is the only one that will be used. But as soon as the instances go to 0, I'm smart just to go in and to choose that particular workflow and say, hey, it doesn't allow any new instances and it has no old instances, no current sleds or wagons running down the hill. I'm going to get rid of it and say, okay. Notice now that the only workflows I have left are workflows that actually have specific instances, folks that are already on their way down the hill, and that every new workflow will be assigned to this one that is not a previous version. No matter how many workflows you have, it's a good idea when you've made changes to workflows to go back and to get rid of any old workflows that have no instances. It's simply part of keeping your server cleaned up. But it also makes it really clear if you have a very old workflow that has an instance that you probably have something that didn't track all the way through to completion, which might be an issue for the business.